Got to unmute. Okay, all set.
For the record, James Duffy, Joint Fiscal Office. It's good to be here with you all today. I am on the Joint Fiscal Office budget team. I was on the revenue team last year. You may have heard a testimony or two from me last year on the fiscal note back when I was on the revenue side of things. But this year I'm staffing House Appropriations, which brings me to you all today. And yes, you may have all heard that House Appropriations Chair Shai is looking to improve the communication both that you all and we all receive from executive branch departments and agencies for the budget cycle this year. There was a new memo that went out in the fall to executive departments and agencies, giving them more instruction, more detail, more clarification about what is a useful format for policy committees and appropriators to receive budget information. And so Chair Shai is really hoping that that sets all the committees up to receive more responsive information from departments and agencies. So we're working on that side of things. And then also Chair Shai had prepared the memo that I just passed out to all of you, which it sounds like many of you have seen before. Guidance, talking points, things to keep in mind for policy committee members and chairs, as you all are hearing from executive branch agencies and departments this year for budget testimony, as well as, outside, advocates, folks who may come in and have fiscally related requests to help guide all of your thinking and the information you gather. I think the intention behind this memo is such that you all, you have your own committee, you run it how you see fit, ask questions how you see fit. When it comes to appropriations requests, House Appropriations is often at the last minute, late at night, looking at the 30,000-foot view of the state budget, right? They are not operating at the same level of kind of policy area expertise and detail that you all do and are able to work at. And so the Appropriations Committee relies on all of you in the policy committees to help inform the prioritization that they do, often on very compressed time schedules, as always with finite information, so that they can make more informed decisions. So that's the intention behind this memo. You all will be hearing from the Appropriations Committee, I believe in the next 1 to 1.5 weeks, with a request for your committee letter, for your committee budget letter to House Appropriations, which will provide kind of more instruction on what information they're hoping to get from you all. But this is to kind of aid you in putting that together. I think the first point and the kind of main thesis of this whole memo is, to the extent that policy committees can prioritize the funding requests that you all pass on to the Appropriations Committee. And actually, I looked at your all's budget committee letter from last year, and you did do this. So I think this might be something that you already have a really good grasp with, but to have like a tiered or prioritized approach to funding requests, right? We know it's going to be a tight budget year, perhaps tighter than we've had in a couple of years, and there will be some hard decisions to make. To the extent that policy committees can say, hey, listen, we know that money is finite. We think all of these requests that we received this year are worthwhile. But if you have to make decisions to not fund any of these, here is how we're thinking about how to prioritize these requests, right? And here's our framework for thinking what we fund, what we don't fund. I'll just pause. I won't go through this memo exhaustively. I'll kind of leave you all to review and feel free to pass on questions. But any questions on the guidance that was sent out to agencies, departments, this from House Appropriations about your committee letter?
Representative Burke?
Just curious who has seen this so far.
This was Sure. This was originally rolled out at a committee chairs meeting a couple of weeks ago. I want to say 2 or 3 weeks ago. And it's been shared on the House Appropriations website since then. So it's been circulating, I'd say, for the last 2 or 3 weeks. Certainly chairs and vice chairs have all seen it. And this is posted on the committee page for approps. Yeah.
How many committees have you been in to talk about this?
You all are maybe my 4th or my 5th. I'm coming in purely at committee's requests. And I anticipate we might have some more questions too once the solicitation from HAC comes out asking you all for your your committee letter, committee letter.
And just to have a time frame in mind, we'll be asked for that letter sometime before town meeting week.
Yes, if past practice is followed, I think last week of February, the week before town meeting week, is usually when those letters are due.
Okay.
House Appropriations.
And we're also thinking seriously at that point in the schedule about what bills are we going to try and get done when we come back from town meeting week. So that was a busy week with a lot to.
I know February is a funny month. Like in Hack, and I'm sure you all too, we're going to hear a couple of weeks of testimony and get a lot of information, and then the rubber hits the road really in the last week of February, heading into town meeting week. Yes, and I would say one thing I'll add, would it be helpful to talk a bit about one-times versus base appropriations? That's been useful for some committees, but I also know folks have varying degrees of pre-existing knowledge.
Yeah, no, I was actually going to say that I think we have a pretty good grasp of base and one-time. I mean, I think of it as there's a base budget that we passed last year, and we're going to be funding all of those things again, except in rare exceptions. And that the governor's budget is going to be funding them, except in rare exceptions. And then we have perhaps new things that might be proposed to go into the base, as well as new things that are one time.
Mm-hmm.
You can correct me if you think that we should be thinking about it differently. But then beyond that, for the purposes of this new approach or this exercise that we're all going to be going through, I mentioned this yesterday to Representative Stevens, that it seemed to me that we were being asked to look at not just what's a one-time request, but what's in the base budget, perhaps not necessarily salaries and staffing levels, but other things that might be in, ongoing that normally we wouldn't be really looking at.
Yes, I think that is the intent of both the guidance that was sent out to agencies and departments and the conversations that Hack is having with committees. Each committee will run things as they see fit, but I think one of the hard things about base appropriations is one-times are easy to scrutinize and give attention to because they are presented individually as a line item each year. Base, it tends to accrete over time. That onion can be hard to peel back the layers of to get a really good understanding of what all is wrapped up in a department's base budget. And, it's often during tighter budget cycles that the base gets examined more granularly. And that's where some of the questions presented here can help be useful to cut through those layers that have accreted over years in departmental base. Like, what is this program? What does it do? What is the need it served? Why was it originally established? What happens if it was cut or reduced, or if it was expanded? Departments often in the past have focused, from what I've heard, the budget conversation on the ups and downs. Here's what we did last year. Here's what we're preparing to tinker with. And I think part of Chair Shai's guidance this year has been to help departments do a more holistic storytelling about what it is they do and why their programs exist, and the needs they're serving, so that you all can have a more informed prioritization conversation about base, right? Because if you're just looking at the ups and downs from one year to the next, there's a certain amount of inertia in decision making that kind of implies. Whereas these questions are meant to help kind of get to the meat of how we build our base budgets. And again, not presupposing any agencies that you'll be hearing from, deserve or will need extra digging into their base, but just as guidance. I think something Hack has heard is that committees often feel like, how can we make sense of a base budget that's been, hasn't been dived deep into in some time? Like, how do you start to peel those layers back?
Yeah, thank you. Two things. One, I think when we have the groups that come in to advocate for funding, we should really look into, and I asked John Sales of the food bank, what's your efficiency? And I had looked it up and he confirmed it, and it's about 15%, takes 15% of their money, what they get from the state and everybody else to run their organization. That's incredibly efficient in the philanthropic world. Ducks Unlimited runs on about 15%. HSUS runs on about 80%. Not so good. So I think we should ask more of these groups, how much does it cost? How much of our limited resource are you using to run your group versus getting the money where it needs to be. Am I wrong with that thinking?
No, I wouldn't disagree with any of that. That's your discretion, right? Like what kind of questions you want to ask, feel appropriate to outside entities. But I certainly efficiency of program delivery, right? How much of this money goes towards recipients directly, for example? I think those are all very good questions to ask, both agencies and outside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the second thing is, how many of y'all serve on school board? And at the end of the year, when there's 3% of the budget left over, and you have two options. You spend it within the school or you send it back to the state. And I have seen some awfully I've seen some fiscally conserved people do some awful crazy things when that money is available. And they're almost like they're planning to have a budget overrun, surplus. So then they could do the projects they want to do without getting them approved. And,
Probably not just true of school boards, but organizations.
yeah,
Right.
that's what I'm driving at.
Yeah,
Well, like grants, oftentimes you'll
Yeah.
see, like if you don't spend it all, then they clap. back.
yeah.
But there could be a program and, hey, I'll take a bullet for the Agency of Agriculture and they're probably watching and gonna throw darts at me, but do they have a program that's getting funded? And I'm sure they're spot on with their programs, but do they have a program that's getting funded that is not being utilized? And then they can take that program money and move it within, or AOT or any of the other agencies out there. Do they receive money because we grant them their request and then they take that money and they can move it over here, move it over there?
We're maybe sort of all thinking, oh, well, the directive here is to go in and see whether there's a place where you can save money if it's not being used wisely. But I think there are also instances where we might feel that there should be more money spent on an existing program, or maybe something that doesn't exist in theory, that the staffing levels aren't enough to, for example, enough to be foresters. That's one that comes up.
Mhm.
John, did you have a hand up?
I don't think so.
Maybe it was Greg.
Yeah, I mean, in my small engineering background, we always studied lean manufacturing, which Toyota developed years ago and became like the leading manufacturer on the planet because of it. So everybody started emulating their model. And, all the drug companies started doing Six Sigma and all that stuff to try to make their companies really at the end of the day, they're looking for profitability, which comes through efficiency and comes through creating a better product with, in a better way, right? So that's, I think it's a great thing to be doing this committee, to just challenge every corner and facet of our government to be doing the best job it can with what it has. I mean, it's not something, might be trying to save money. It might be trying to take the money they have and use it better. It might be expanding something to service more people in a greater need. But yeah, that general idea that I don't like the idea of a culture where we just try to get as much as we can in our corner, and every year, the end goal is to expand that. We don't want our budget to shrink. Like, how do we dispel that type of culture? And it's
And then
really
that's making
crucial.
everybody's taxes go up.
Exactly.
The culture of you don't spend it, you lose it.
Yes, it needs to be a culture of we're one big happy family. Actually, I mean, we are at the end of the day here as a team trying to work together to make our state better, and so how do we foster that? But yeah, there needs to be these conversations, money asking and what the program's doing needs to involve accountability and fostering that.
Yeah, and I suspect that we'll find, like, we're sitting here 4 weeks from today, getting ready to leave for town meeting, right? I think today's our 4th week, so it's 4 more weeks. And we'll have finished our work on the budget, and I said, wow, we barely scratched the surface. realistically, there's so much. So I think we should really be thinking, what can we do? How can we use this time that we have? We have lots of other things to do too. How can we use this budget time most effectively? And hopefully the agencies that we're working with they got not this memo, but the same story asked of them back, in the fall. So I think that won't come as a surprise to them, and hopefully they'll be coming in with, in a way that will be helpful, so that we're not just sort of trying to scratch away.
Right, yeah. And this is the first year that this updated guidance went out to agencies and departments. So, it'll take time. I think the committee hack would love to hear from you all about how it goes, right? Like what worked and whether you saw a difference in the testimony.
You say
this year.
hack?
House Appropriations Committee, apologies. Yeah. Yep. House Appropriations. And the only chair, you made a point that I think is a good one, right? The questions that this are presented to you all in this memo, they're outcome neutral. And I think the advice and the guidance from Appropriations Committee is outcome neutral, right? Maybe you ask some tough questions about priorities and program function and efficiency, and it leads you to say, wow, this is a really good, effective program. We recommend increasing or respecting or accepting this recommendation to increase this funding. Maybe it leads you to reduce funding, right? This is meant to help guide you all in reaching those priorities, whether that's an up or a down.
Somebody got asked a question yesterday. I don't remember who it was, sort of getting to the point about no one has given us an amount of money or a box and said, this is how much money your committee's jurisdiction has to work with, and you decide how to do it. It's not the way it works. And it's at the end of the day, appropriations we collectively have to decide, across the entire state government. So it's not by design, but just by the way it is, it's not a perfect, approach system, but we are being asked to make recommendations on, the areas that we have insight into. So I think, we'll make priorities, we'll list priorities, and other committees will list priorities too. And how strongly we make the case for our priorities matters, I think, also. And we saw that in the BAA. I think we were able to say, here are a couple of things that we think are important, and here's why. And seems to have been
We'll see.
convincing.
So far.
John. It just reminded me, bringing up school boards. I mean, one thing that I never remember happening, in our policy committees is that sort of school board model where you're like, you have to level fund your budget, or it has to be at 85%. Like, we always have recommendations of our 6 or 10 things, usually one time, that we're asked to push forward as priorities. But we've never been on the other side of that, where we're like, what are our priorities if we had to cut 10% or 15%? Like, what would those programs be? Like the opposite of the low hanging fruit, right? The things that should probably go, even though, I mean, it seems like the agencies agriculture and FBR do a pretty good job of justifying what they do. There's not a lot of fat there, but it would be interesting if all the policy committees had to say, like, these are our priorities for cuts.
So this year, what are wages and health insurance going up for the agencies? Is it 4, 5, 6%?
Increase?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm not prepared to answer that question right now. I don't have that number in front of
Are
me.
you a lawyer or CPA?
Listen to a lot of testimony from lawyers, so you pick up a few things.
Richard, so it's probably higher than that for state employees. I can't imagine that they got a much better deal.
Yeah,
Well,
it's not a small.
So what I'm saying is they were given a directive, their budgets could only increase 3% this year.
Yeah.
So they are
Constrained.
within their budgets, making the hard decisions of where they're trimming and, and then you have A&R looking to put on more people to manage their CAFO program. And I can take this rant up later.
Well, go ahead.
And they're an agency that employs probably more people than AOT.
600.
Yeah. And so why can't they move people within their department to fill those roles to be CAFO inspectors? And, you know.
Maybe they can, we don't know what their,
Mhm.
yeah, what their proposals look like.
It's at least okay to ask those questions.
Yeah.
Mhm.
What's that? Do we know what the overall increase is compared to in the governor's proposed budget compared to?
Overall increase from last year.
Yeah,
The instructions to departments were to keep it to, I want to say, 3% increase, but I would, I'll
is
follow
that
up
what
with
it came out
the.
to be? Is it, it's the bottom line, 3% more?
I'm sorry, I've been on the BAA this last week. I'm doing my homework on FY27. We've gotten the BA out of the house. I wish I had that information for you, but I can follow up for you and
Thank you.
That's code young person speak for chair. I'm burnt right now.
No, sorry, I should know that answer, but I don't off the top of my head. But it was the instructions, and I think the outcome I think the outcome was fairly close to the instructions that were given to the individual departments. I want to say it came out close to a 3% overall increase.
Does the legislature have the actual governor's economic budget?
Yes, and that is posted on the JFO website for anyone who cares to look at it. We have the governor's recommended FY27 budget live on
Okay.
the JFO website.
We have FPR, Forest Parks and Recreation, coming in next Wednesday, I think, and then the Agency of Agriculture the next day. So we'll have both of those branches that we work with, the agencies that we work with.
It's great that you guys have all heard from Representative Stevens already as your liaison on appropriations. So he's a resource for you in terms of follow-up from the committee questions you have. Also JFO, if there's any assistance you all need in getting information from agencies on the fiscal side of things, I definitely encourage you to reach out to myself. And if I'm not the right person, I'll make sure that it gets to the right person at JFO.
Just point out, I think these are really good questions for us to keep in mind, try to keep in mind anytime anyone comes asking for money.
Yeah.
They seem really,
Not just,
Really excellent.
not just agencies, I mean, but anybody.
anyway, yeah.
And you said this was sent to agencies too.
No, this was circulated among legislators here in the building. There is another memo which is posted on your webpage. I will double check I sent it, but a separate memo was sent in October to the agencies and departments, providing them detailed instructions on what they should include in their budget presentations to the legislature this year.
Were these sent to all those little various committees that come before us as well that are looking for money asks?
Other policy committees?
Yeah.
So every chair has access to them. I don't know who's circulated it to their membership. It is posted on the website. It's certainly not embargoed information. I don't think it's been systematically distributed to every, committee member.
I think maybe, I'm not sure if this is what you're asking, Greg, but organizations like the food bank, anybody who is coming in and saying,
Under Free Vermont.
Oh, I see.
Our usual.
yeah, yes, yeah.
Outside entities, not policy committees here, but outside. No, this hasn't been circulated outside of the legislature, at least not by myself or anybody I know. But I would say feel free to take inspiration from this and either share these questions with folks ahead of testimony and say, hey, FYI, have these questions in mind or be prepared to answer these questions when you come in to testify. I think communicating with witnesses in advance about what you expect to hear from them is a great way to set yourself up for a successful half hour if that's all you get with them that year, right?
Good. All right. Anything else on this topic?
I would just say you'll be hearing from the Appropriations Committee, I think, in the next week or two with follow-up about the committee letter for this year.
Okay.
Please feel free to reach out. I hope this has been helpful and
I'm really
very glad to.
Thank you. Appreciate your thought.
Is there a deadline on our letter?
Not as of yet. If it's like previous years, it'll be last week of February, heading into town meeting week.
Yeah, maybe the Wednesday of that week.
That's what it was last year. Yeah, it was the Wednesday of the final week of February last year.
Why don't let's not take a break. Since Mike's here, I see Mike got here a little bit early. You can come up if you want, Mike, to the table. And I just want to mention to you, what's it called, thinking of Patricia, if we can make sure we note on the agenda that before we took our last break, we spent 15 minutes having a committee discussion about municipal ag regulation, which was not on the agenda. So I want to be sure that is there so that anybody who's looking at it can go back and watch if they want to. So we asked Mike to come in because yesterday we had heard some testimony from the ANR Council on the H632, which is a committee bill coming out of environment. We heard that testimony. We actually looked at some of we looked at the language, we had it up and Patricia was scrolling through it. But I thought it might be good, Mike, to just have you come in as a follow-up to point out anything that maybe independently, I don't know if you watched your testimony, but things that you think we should be aware of this bill. Chair Sheldon asked us to look at it.
Okay, I need the Zoom link if I could get it.
Sending it to you again right now by email.
Richard, does Legislative Council have somebody working with that CAFO group?
Sent. But I'm not seeing you in the Zoom, so I wonder.
I need the Zoom, I need the link.
I was thinking about permission, yeah.
It's like when we were working on wetlands,
You have it now.
right?
Thank you.
Which helped a lot.
I'll speak to that. I'm finding it hard to be able to, and I need to be at those meetings, but I'm finding it hard to be at those meetings and not be in here at the same time. I can't, but the next, when we meet with the applicants again, I've asked Council Collier and Council Gresham to me and our.
Can I share as well,
Yes.
please?
Yeah, giving you permission.
Yeah.
So, this version of the bill is it's on the House Environment Committee website. They have asked for changes. There are going to be at least one change to the language related to concentrated animal feeding operations. And I'll point that out to you. But just background, I know you heard from Catherine yesterday, Catherine Guessing. She probably put this in context for you, reminded you of last year in response to the EPA order, in response to the CLF petition. The state had to enhance the authority of ANR to do permitting of discharges from CAFOs. Unbeknownst to you all and to me as well, apparently EPA provided some input on the language last year and it didn't make it in to your bill last year. And this is being offered to reconcile what EPA requested. And a large part of it is just, I would call technical, but maybe a little oversensitive of EPA to request some of these. There is a provision in here that I know the agency does not like and does not want. And the committee, House Environment, has agreed to remove, but I honestly don't think it makes much of a difference. And I'll talk about that.
Agency of Natural Resources does not want.
The Agency of Agriculture.
Agency Ag does not, okay.
And I don't think it really makes much difference if it's in or if it's out, and I will explain why. So there are about 14 pages that are amending the concentrated animal feeding operations requirements, and it's sections 16 through 21. The first changes are in Title VI and the Agency of Agriculture's authority. And this is really to clarify that the authority that they have is over large farms and it's not over CAFOs. Remember, CAFO is an A&R program now. And so A&R has the large farm operation permit. And then there was this debate that I probably caused. When you see the slash there, that's called technically a vergul. And a vergul, courts interpret a vergul to mean or. But most people think it means and or. So we don't use the vergul. So I replaced the vergul with or, and it turns out that it should be and. And so that's a change that the Environment Committee is going to make. And they'll make it several places because even if the language hasn't changed, there's multiple references to cow or calf pairs in the language.
It should be, will become cow and calf.
Yes.
Greg?
Yeah, probably, I just, before you said and, on my mind, I was thinking with,
You're thinking what?
the word with instead of and.
Yeah.
Yeah, cow.
They talked to Laura DePietro, and Laura would prefer the vergul, but we just don't do it. And I taught a continuing legal education class on the use of conjunctions, and one of the train wreck examples I gave is a case out of Tennessee where they were using the vergul, and it led to a person convicted of drunk driving with manslaughter to be found innocent because the court read the vergul as an or, and they couldn't show all of the components of the offense, and the person got off. So we don't use the vergul because of it's how it can be subject to interpretation.
Thank you for our new $5 work.
Exactly.
Representative Bartholomew.
If you actually wanted it to mean both, you'd have to use the verb will have and or.
We would say cow, comma, calf, comma, or both.
Okay.
So, moving on from there, there's just a reference that when the Secretary of Natural Resources is issuing a permit, it's going to be the NIPD's permit, the federal permit.
Thank you.
And then in the discharge permit, now moving away from Title VI into Title 10, this is A&R's authority. One of the things that you required last year in the bill was that A&R is going to issue a CAFO general permit by December 15th, 2025. They have not. There's been testimony that the stakeholder process involved in coming up with that permit has been vigorous, and that the agencies will need more time. I don't know if Catherine spoke to that yesterday. House Environment was discussing whether or not they should shorten that time frame or grant the time frame. For the time being, they're leaving it as September 1, 2027. Moving on from there, there is language in the bill last year that says a large CAFO shall not be required to have a CAFO permit unless one of the following conditions is met. And A&R in the bill as introduced proposed that there be the language that say the secretary determines in the secretary's discretion that a CAFO permit is required. Now, this is the language that the Agency of Agriculture has asked to be removed, and that the committee has for the time being. I say for the time being because I can't commit to what they're going to vote on. And for the time being has agreed to remove. I don't think this makes a difference because in this bill later on in the Agency of Natural Resources Authority, in the actual permitting section, it says that they already have the authority to designate any AFO that meets the definition of a CAFO as a CAFO to get a permit. So I understand that the language that the Agency of Agriculture wants to remove is not well drafted. It's not artfully drafted and can be subject to confusion. But the Secretary of Natural Resources already has the authority to designate any CAFO that meets the definition of a CAFO that needs a permit, which means that they're discharging to get a permit. And that's consistent with federal law. This is the EPA rule for CAFOs. They redid their rules a couple of years ago in this question and answer response format, because we're too dumb to like read and understand it. So we have to do it. And so how may an AFO be designated as a CAFO? The appropriate authority, i.e. the state director or the regional administrator or both, may designate any AFO as a CAFO upon determining that it is a significant contributor of pollutants to waters of the United States. So that's there. ANR already has that authority. So I don't think, I understand getting rid of this language. It's not well drafted. It could lead to ambiguity or confusion, but it really doesn't change the underlying authority.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. I think the issue is the secretary determines in the secretary's discretion that a CAFO permit is required. And, up above, it shows where a CAFO will be required to become a NPDES. Okay, if they're having a discharge into the waters, and it's not in this case, it's not the waters of the United States, it's the waters of the state. Okay, we made that determination last year, correct?
Right. But I see your point, but I think really it's just not drafted well. It should say the secretary determines in her discretion that they're a significant contributor of pollutants. Right.
And then that is 100%.
Right.
With what we passed last year, what we're talking about in the stakeholder group.
Right.
Agreed.
And you should also be aware that under stormwater law, if the discharge from the CAFO is purely stormwater and it's coming off the production area, then they have that authority there to say it needs to get a permit there. But there's processed wastewater that's mixed up with the stormwater, then you're into the authority that I just referenced. So there's a lot of overlapping like Venn diagrams here but if you take this out, I don't think you change the Venn diagram.
So at one of the meetings, I think a Zoom meeting that I was in here, not on Zoom, they talked about intermittent discharges. And they have spent an exhausting amount of time talking about intermittent discharges. And I said, there is no such thing as an intermittent discharge, because an intermittent discharge is a discharge. Simple.
Right. And then even if it's not continuous, the secretary can say it's a significant contributor to the pollutant.
You need to get your NPDES.
Right.
So you have protections until you fix the problem to not have the intermittent discharge again.
Is the language that we're looking at here, language that the agency developed, or is this?
It was proposed ANR sent language to be added to the miscellaneous environmental bill, and this is what they said. Whether or not the Agency of Agriculture reviewed this beforehand, I am unaware. I don't know.
John?
Yeah, just quickly, what was there was a reference to a large CAFO. That just seemed,
There are different tiers of CAFOs. There's the small, medium, and large. So the large for purposes of dairy is 700 mature dairy
it
cows.
refers to the LFO, MFO.
Well, the LFO numbers were drawn from, remember, like back in 2004, the state program was set up to avoid going into the NPDES permit program, but they modeled the LFO, the numbers on what the NPDES numbers would have been. So it's who went first, doesn't really matter. It's the same numbers now.
Because it just seemed redundant in that, it certainly in the sort of media world, if you say, CAFO is coming to Vermont, right? It's a large concentrated animal feeding operation. It's not like 100 sheep, it's 700 cows.
Right, and I even can't even remember what the sheep numbers are. There are a lot of sheep. 10,000.
Oh, hell, I'm gonna go milking
So,
sheep.
so can you have a 500 sheep CAFO?
Yeah, that would be a small CAFO.
I never heard that small CAFO. Yeah.
But whether or not it would require a permit, the small CAFOs have a different threshold.
In a small CAFO or animal feeding operation, a small one has to be a significant contributor to discharges to the waters of the state.
So why don't we keep going?
Okay.
And I think that when we went through it yesterday, that seemed to be the one, the number 4, that was, of most interest to the committee and, or that Catherine thought would be of most interest to the committee. I don't know if there's others that sort of jump out, or if there's others that you want to focus on, or just go through it.
I will skip over the technical ones. There's like technical language changes. And then like this one where EPA wants their language for when 2 or more CAFOs are considered one for purposes of permitting. I don't know why they needed to change that, but it does the same thing. And then like these, instead of cross-referencing the definitions of LFOs, they're like, no, you have to put the actual definition in the statute, and because we have to be clear, it's Title 10 authority, not Title 6 authority. I mean, this is a little bit of unnecessary bootstrapping, in my opinion. But that's what they did. Same thing.
Another question here.
This was a question I asked yesterday. I think we were told that this is put in here to match a federal definition.
It is. It is, but it's the same language. Almost. It's not entirely. It's almost exactly the same as what the definition of LFO, the numbers. And so it's what EPA wanted. They want this to be their language. They want it to be clear in the natural resources title.
But I'm wondering though, is what legislative council is recommending now in terms of when we're referencing federal language that could change, then all of a sudden the state language is out of date unless we go back and change it. Wouldn't it just make more sense to reference federal statute?
I understand your point. But later in this bill, there's actually a section that gives agencies emergency rulemaking authority if the administration repeals federal programs and the cross references in state law are dependent on those repealed programs. The air pollution control regulations are a great example. Our state has pretty extensive air pollution control regs, but they're largely based on cross-referencing federal law. Well, that federal law is changing, and that's throwing our state air pollution regs out of whack. Like, are they even enforceable potentially? It's like, so when you do that incorporation by reference, I recommend that you're confident that the program is stable. I wouldn't say water law at the federal level right now is stable. So maintaining your law and what you want the law to be in statute without reliance on federal incorporation by reference is something I would recommend at this point in time for water.
Rather than trying to repeat everything you just said and digest it, I'm going to just assume that there's a good reason to do this.
Well, A, EPA requested it, and B, you can't necessarily rely that the water regs are going to remain what they are.
The irony is that we are doing this because the federal government is asking us to do it.
Yes.
So there's that. I see, I'm not going to suggest that we stop and have another conversation about whatever that word was that's new to.
Cow calf pairs are changing all throughout. If it says cow or calf.
Lambs are treated differently. That was the thing that I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Sheep lamb pairs are not,
Right.
what kind of.
We don't use that phrase.
There's a 10,000 sheep farm in Vermont, is there?
I know.
John's trying to fly under the radar.
So moving on from there, you, again, this is in the medium farm operation. EPA wanted their language, didn't want the cross-reference. Same basis, same discussion. Anything to point out? I mean, this is the language we already discussed, that ANR already has the authority to designate a NAPO as a NPDES CAPO if it meets those federal regs or the NPDES requirements. And then they can establish technical standards and require a CAFO to comply with them, provided that they're consistent with USDA nutrient management, buffers, and any other CAFO requirement in the Clean Water Act and some of the Clean Water Act rules. And that's really a technical kind of clarifying. Oh, the last section is really, remember how the agencies, both agencies had a memorandum of understanding of how that they were going to coordinate enforcement and inspection, et cetera. And EPA said, get rid of the MOU. You need to be clear that ANR has that overlying controlling authority for discharges. And you struck the MOU, but they still have to execute a document about how the process for implementing the two programs would work. In the ANR appeals section, there was a reference to the MOU that was never changed, actually ANR enforcement chapter, that it was never changed. And so this is just changing that reference to the MOU to the document that was sufficient for EPA. And then that's that. But for Representative Bartholomew's knowledge, you can see the authority for the emergency rule, where an agency may adopt an urgency rule if an amendment to federal statute, rule, or policy will materially conflict with or threaten the ability of the agency to implement a statutory regulatory program in Vermont. So largely technical. The one substantive piece of language that was at issue is for the time being, as far as I know, is going to be removed. Doesn't, in my opinion, affect the authority of either agency. It doesn't undermine what EPA wanted. And I think these are relatively harmless.
That's what we like. And are you back in House Environment next week? Are they taking this up again?
Yeah, Tuesday afternoon, I will have a redraft that takes out a bunch of sections that they're not going to do.
Okay.
Takes out the language that we discussed that was at issue. And that's it.
We, maybe once they've made all those changes, I don't know whether it would be necessary, but having us take a straw poll just in support of them would be a good idea.
I think the committee downstairs would appreciate that.
All right, is there anything else on this topic?
Want to come to a stakeholders meeting?
Oh, man. I've been to those meetings before. It's like,
Please.
We're back here on Monday, sorry, not Monday, Tuesday at 1 o'clock. And we've got testimony Tuesday afternoon on the Working Lands program. And it can be an opportunity for us to think, this is not a budget presentation. We will be getting a budget request for working lands, but we can be thinking about the fact that that budget request will be coming in, asking questions during the presentation. All right, anything else anybody's got today? Have a nice weekend.
Thank you,
All
Council.
right.
Thank you.
Have a great week.